In five, four, three, two, one. And we are live. What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Wolf. Good to see you all here, man. Today we're joined by Dennis Porter, CEO of Satoshi Action Fund, one of the leading voices. They're shaping Bitcoin policy in the U.S., breaking down the Mines in America Act. That's specifically the reason we're here to talk today. What it means for the energy market, for energy, for markets, for Bitcoin, for mining, literally all the things. We're also going to get some updates around Satoshi Action Fund, just in general, what it's like to be Dennis Porter, a little bit behind the scenes, what happens in between the announcements and things like that. Most people like me are just yapping on Twitter. We're talking to people on Twitter and stuff, or X. We got people out here on the front lines. They're out here flying. They're going to courtrooms and stuff. Very different reality. And so it's always good to be joined by you, Dennis. How are you?
I'm doing great. Glad to be on. Very excited about the recent news and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's the first thing I want to dive into. So you called this the most important Bitcoin legislation yet. Tell me a little bit about the Mines in America Act. What makes it different? I'll see if I can share my screen here a little bit as well for people who haven't caught it. I'm sure you have. It's kind of all over the timeline right now. This is what it looks like, the big article that you guys posted. I have it pulled up right here. So tell me a little bit about this. This is the one we're talking about, guys.
Yeah, so the Mind in America Act, which to clarify is Bitcoin's most important new piece of legislation.
Yes.
I didn't want to try to take the moniker of it being the most important, but I do believe it is the most important new piece of legislation that has made its way onto the Senate. We saw Senator Cassidy and Senator Lummis join together to make this introduction. Really, this has been led by Senator Cassidy's office. They have been doing incredible work for a long time now, going back months and months and months working on this legislation because they really care. They really care about the opportunity that Bitcoin mining has to offer. They really care about the fact that we have a major supply chain problem with Bitcoin and digital asset mining hardware, where today roughly 97% of that hardware is manufactured by Chinese companies. That's a major problem. I'm sure we can dive into all of that, but really, yeah, really excited to have been able to work alongside these offices, Senator Cassidy's office, again, doing amazing work. And of course, Senator Lummis joining in was awesome to see, given that she has been the Bitcoin champion for so many years.
Yeah, 100%. And tell me a little bit as well, like if this passes, what actually changes first? Is it the markets, more mining economics, geopolitics? Like what is what would happen first, I guess, if this goes through?
Yeah, the first thing that'll happen is that it'll give a pathway for Bitcoin miners to be able to become certified. In order to be certified, they have to move through a process of onboarding US made hardware or allied made hardware to their digital asset mining operations. It's a staged process, so it takes about 4 years. But the moment they join the program and start to follow the standards, they can become certified. It starts off by making it so they don't purchase any new hardware in year one. Year two, they have to cut their fleet down by 25%. So that they have essentially 25% US made hardware. Then it's 50% the next year, and then they have to be 100% all US or allied made hardware by the end of that 4 year period. Once they are certified, then they can qualify for four different DOE USDA programs like DOE Title 17, USDA's REAP program, the DOE Smart Grid Investment Program, and the DOE Infrastructure Reinvestment Program. All of these four programs were set up in a way that would help to encourage positive energy and environmental behavior, including balancing the grid, mitigating methane emissions, supporting things like wind and solar. So it's a really giant sort of like virtuous loop. If you do this really good thing of moving to US made hardware to help move away from Chinese made hardware, which has a couple of big problems. One being the supply chain component, where if export controls were put into place for whatever reason, it could be China just wakes up one day and says, we're not going to give you this equipment anymore. Alternatively, if we were to get into an open conflict with China, of course, that would end it as well. And then the second part is the national security concern, where you can put a backdoor or kill switches within these machines, which is something that certain players in the industry from China have done before. During 2017, 2018, there was a backdoor discovered in the mining equipment, and of course it was quickly removed. But it just shows that there is a real threat and a real problem around these components. So if you do the good thing of switching away from Chinese hardware and you switch to U.S. manufactured hardware, allied hardware, then you get access to these programs, which encourage you to do even more good behavior, like balancing the grid, mitigating methane emissions, and supporting energy infrastructure, which is something that we already know that Bitcoin miners can and will do. We're seeing it happen all across the country. during Winter Storm Elliott. Bitcoin miners wound down and delivered 1,700 megawatts of power back to the grid in the middle of that emergency. That's enough power to heat 1.7 million small homes in the middle of a winter storm. So it's incredibly impactful. We're seeing Bitcoin miners all across the country and all across the world help support clean energy. Down in Brazil, Engie just announced that at one of their largest solar farms, they're plugging in Bitcoin mines right now as we speak to help solve their curtailment problem or their wasted energy problem. And then also we are seeing Bitcoin miners mitigate methane emissions from landfills. We wrote a paper, in fact, on this, which was put into a top academic journal, top 2% journal, which outlined how this is an economically viable way for us to do something that's good for the environment. So very excited about all these parts. And then the third part as well that's really important, which creates another incentive loop for the miners, is that if you are a Bitcoin miner that is certified, then you can sell your Bitcoin to the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, which is codified by this language. And you can do so and receive a capital gains exemption in the process. That's important because it gives Treasury the flexibility and the negotiating power to negotiate better purchase price for the Bitcoin that they purchase, making the dollars go even further. And some people might ask, well, where are the dollars coming from? And that's from the digital asset stockpile. The digital asset stockpile, which is also codified by this language, is a revenue generating source. Many cryptocurrencies, whether they be Ethereum, Solana, you name it, once they're sitting in that digital asset stockpile, they can be staked, they can generate revenue, and that revenue can be used to buy Bitcoin for the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. All of that is in mind in America. That's why I have said many times now that I think it is the most important new piece of legislation for Bitcoin.
Well, okay, that's cool. Yeah, I was going to say, so like the place I was going to go is exactly where you went. I was going to break down that tweet you had made where you went to codify the strategic Bitcoin Reserve, create budget neutral Bitcoin purchases, boost U.S. Bitcoin mining manufacturing, and also recognizing mining as an energy tool. You literally just hit on all of them, so that's fantastic. Follow up there. So you mentioned specifically creates a pipeline for miners to sell Bitcoin directly to the government, and then they're able to buy that with the money from staking, which is awesome. Would this create a permanent bid pressure on Bitcoin? What does this look like? Do you think I guess that'd be my first question. Would this create a permanent bid pressure for Bitcoin? That is an interesting question to me. But also, how top of mind is this for people just in Congress, in DC? Like, is this top of mind for them? Is this like a thing like on a side desk, or where does this sit, you think, for them?
Well, I think it's highlighted for the fact that Senator Cassidy is the leader on this, but also that Senator Lummis has co-led on it. So this is a legitimate effort. And we are also working, and I know Senator Cassidy's office is working, and others as well, to help find Democratic co-sponsors to join in on the legislation. We've had incredibly productive conversations with Democratic offices. As one of the things that I think should be highlighted is that Satoshi Action is truly a very nonpartisan organization, which has enabled us to help pass legislation both in deep red states and deep blue states. We've passed law in states like Kansas, Kentucky, and New Hampshire, and we've also passed legislation in states like California. And so that's why we feel very confident that through our advocacy, we can help to find a Democratic co-sponsor and find Democratic support. At the end of the day, even if you do not like Bitcoin, it is a completely bipartisan desire to see more manufacturing in the United States. It is a bipartisan desire to see the grid be balanced, to see clean energy be supported, and to see supply chains be here in the United States and remove foreign adversary threats where Bitcoin mining is almost entirely dominated by Chinese supply chains, where there can be threats to our national security and also threats to our grid security. And so because of this, again, even if you are not a big Bitcoin believer, it doesn't require a large amount of belief in Bitcoin or in Bitcoin mining. It just simply states that, do you want these good things to happen? Do you want the grid to be balanced? Do you want to see supply chains here in the United States? Pretty much every senator we talk to and every member of Congress that we talk to does like those things. In fact, those that understand energy the most and those that understand national security the most are the most interested in this type of legislation. We've had incredibly productive meetings talking about it with various Senate offices. That's where the bill has started, so that's where most of the work will be. And we're feeling very confident that this legislation can move forward. There are a couple of legislative vehicles that we're identifying so that we can move it forward as well. Instead of just being a standalone bill, there are other options that we can attach it to. Certain must-pass bills, are great vehicles that we could attach this to.
That's very cool. And we've been in the pro crypto regime for a little bit now. We've had some time to sit with it. We've had President Trump in office. We've had the SBR was passed like a little while ago. Maybe didn't go exactly as we had planned or hoped for some people. I guess for me, I'm more interested in just like, hey, will the name of Bitcoin get bigger and bigger each year? It seems like it is. Even if price goes down 50%, more people know about it. And you still got the biggest, asset managers and hedge fund managers and Larry Fink's out there. I'm still talking about Bitcoin. He mentioned tokenization of markets in his annual shareholders letter. So like the industry as a whole seems to be moving forward. What have you found when you're speaking with people in DC? Like, is the word getting out there more? Like, are they coming more around to it? Has the price impacted how they think about the industry? Like, where are they sitting with all this?
I think me and you, we pay attention to the price every day. I think a lot of the people that might be watching pay attention to the price every day. Most members of Congress and their staff are not. The only time I know where Congress and even state lawmakers pay an incredible amount of attention to the price is when the price crashes so low that we start to see exchanges collapse. We
Yeah.
start to see a lot of consumers lose a lot of money. So I would not say the price is something that members of Congress are incredibly worried about. I would say it's something that maybe they notice, but they're not paying too much attention to that because it isn't causing these cataclysmic type events like an FTX collapse. That's when members of Congress really start to become concerned. That's when the staff become very concerned. And we're not seeing that because I also believe that we're seeing a huge improvement in the market. We're seeing the market mature. We're seeing people stay away from riskier and riskier approaches to the technology. And I think that's only going to increase as time goes on. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a truly scarce asset with only 21 million Bitcoin that have ever will exist. And it makes it a lot like the real estate market, which is a common comparison that we talk about. I mean, even the real estate market has theoretically can create more supply, but it is a constrained supply. And over time, even though there are ups and downs in the real estate market, you're always going to see the price of property go up over time. That's the same analogy that we use with members of staff in Congress, and we find it to be a very salient way for them to understand the simple protocol of Bitcoin and how it operates.
Definitely. And where do you sit with the ETFs? So you brought it up. I was watching the Daily Stack show. You went on with Rob and a few of those guys, and you mentioned the ETF launch was big for these markets. Tell me a little bit about how you think about it, as well as maybe what that move forward for people. I feel you have a very unique angle into this. Just bring your perspective in. What do you think about this? How much has this moved the industry forward? What actually changed versus maybe is just more of like an announcement? Like people put it out and they just said, Bitcoin ETFs, and they kind of just ran with that. And for some people, they were like, hey, this isn't as big of a deal as people thought. I was of the belief that that's massive. And I'd love to get some of your thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes down to how people categorize whether something is a big deal or not. You have a large portion of people in the space who, if the price doesn't go to 10 trillion, that it wasn't a big deal.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's just not true. I think that it was an incredibly huge deal for the industry, a huge maturing moment. And I think that also, I believe that also the size and the scope of how quickly that ETF launch went and how much Bitcoin was purchased is a huge signal. It's one of the most successful ETF launches in history. And so I don't think people should discount that. I think for a lot of people, though, at the end of the day, it's all about price. Yeah. And if you're only thinking about price, you're going to be disappointed a lot. You need to be thinking about the infrastructure and the support and the regulatory guidance that's being issued and the legislation that's about to be passed, creating a foundation for a more stable future. Personally, I don't mind the ups and downs. I've been here since 2017, so I'm pretty used to it. But as we get more of this infrastructure in place, as we see more institutions come in, more players come in, more regulations be set in stone, we are going to see a more stable market. I commonly go back to the Telecommunications Act that was passed in the 90s. And after that was passed, we saw adoption go through the roof. We saw the value of the market go through the roof for the telecommunications space. And it all happened right after that was passed. So I do believe that market structure will play a big role in that. I do believe that the price would be much lower than it is today if we didn't have the ETF. So I think people should appreciate to some extent, how far Bitcoin has come, and really that it's up and to the right from here.
Yeah, definitely. I love to peel back the curtain a little bit, get an inside look into Satoshi Action Fund. So for people who don't know as well, maybe give like the 30-second on what you guys are doing with Satoshi Action Fund. But I'd love to hear, like what happens behind the scenes. What do people not see about the legal side of passing bills, being in there for Bitcoin, digital assets? What does your life look like, behind the scenes, in between announcements, things like that?
Yeah, in between the announcements of the announcements, there's a lot of work that goes into our outcomes. So just as a history, going back in history, I used to be a podcaster, media personality in the space. That was how I was adding value, and I had a great time doing it. But eventually I started to notice that there was a big deficit in political engagement, particularly from the Bitcoin community. And so I was pounding the table, telling everyone on my shows and all my channels and on Twitter, we need to start educating and we need to be more active. For the most part, when I first started saying that, people thought I was crazy, that we don't need government. But I kept continuing to push. And my common line that I use is that you might not be interested in government and you might not be interested in politics, but government and politics is definitely interested in you. And if you want your country to be a leader the way that El Salvador is a leader, or the way that we're a leader on tech today in the United States, it takes that type of engagement, education, and more than ever, many U.S. Senate offices are incredibly interested in learning from people, experts in their fields, people that truly understand the technology, but also their constituents. Hearing from constituents is so important, which is why Satoshi Action has had already over 250,000 letters sent through our system, where we've encouraged constituents to send letters to their lawmakers. And we're going to be doing a lot more of that. We're going to be doing that with Minded America. We're going to be doing that with other policy provisions like de minimis. We're very excited about getting that constituent engagement. But ultimately, what happened was I'm yelling and ranting and raving about these things while I'm doing my show, my podcast, and then eventually, some bad things did happen during the IIJA. The broker amendment component happened. So I won't get into the details of why it was so bad, but it freaked everybody out, and they all realized we need to be more politically engaged. And that was sort of the impetus for the launch of Satoshi Action. I went on to find some great co-founders. I went on to find a great policy person, and we got off to the races. But one thing that we did that was different from most groups is we made the strategic decision to start at the state level. Back in 2022, when we launched Satoshi Action, there was nothing happening in Congress. In fact, really only bad things were happening in Congress for crypto and digital assets writ large. So we went to the states and we started to work on legislation, and we ended up passing 11 bills into law across 11 different states. We're about to pass our 12th bill into law. We're really excited about it, sitting on the governor's desk right now. And what that did is it built up this sort of bottom-up movement for policy. People commonly call it the laboratory of democracy. You can use the 50 states as a method to be able to sort of test out your different ideas and try to pass them into law. And you can influence federal policy that way. And we've already seen that take place not only in this space, we've seen it take place in issue over issue after issue, everything from a woman's right to vote to civil rights to cannabis. All of these industries, all of these issues have used the states as a method to pursue their policy objectives, and then eventually that momentum was used as a way to impact federal policy. We saw that probably most miraculously with the women's right to vote, and we're seeing it play out right now in front of our eyes with cannabis. We've seen a lot of states legalize cannabis, and now that's putting a lot of pressure on the federal government to act. We have seen some actions, but we obviously want to see a little bit more for those people that are within the cannabis space. That would be their objective, and we're doing that exactly right now with crypto, with Bitcoin, digital assets. And that's why I've moved to Washington, D.C., because we've converted our work from just being about the states to being about Washington and federal policy as well. And fortunately, because of the last 4 years of working at the state level, cutting my teeth, so to speak, at the state level, it has put me in a great place. When I go to Capitol Hill, there's really no one on Capitol Hill that is like Satoshi Action with regards to Bitcoin policy, crypto policy, because there's nobody that's passed 12 bills into law in 11 different states. There's nobody that's done a body of academic work, and I mean collectively all this together. Certainly some people have done a little bit of this, but we've done over a dozen academic papers, 7 of which have been peer reviewed. One was even in a top 2% journal. We helped advocates write the 250,000 letters. We've engaged. We've handed out books to every single member of Congress. We have had letters sent to every single state lawmaker, every federal lawmaker across the country, and we're also an independent organization. So we're the vast majority of our funding comes from individuals, which puts us in a great position to speak very clearly about what the opportunity is, and to be very pragmatic about the approach to policy. Not discounting the other groups and the way that they operate or the way that they function. I think every part of advocacy, trade associations, other nonprofits, corporations, as they all engage, they have the right to do so, and they should, and I think it's important. But we are in this position where we can just be very clear-minded when we're speaking to lawmakers, and we don't have a sort of corporate interest. We don't make more money if a certain law passes one way or the other. That allows staff and members of Congress to trust us quicker, because trust is incredibly important in the policy process. It is a very delicate process. There can be a lot of mistakes along the way. We certainly have made some at the state level, which again I think is why it was so important that we cut our teeth at the state level. But now that we're at the federal level, we get the great opportunity to work with folks like Senator Cassidy, Senator Lummis on things like Mind in America. But this is just the beginning. We're going to have more and more and more of these pieces of legislation that we work on that we feel like are the future of policy for Bitcoin. We are planning to skate where the puck is going, not to where it's been. And we find that to be incredibly valuable, and is why we are going to see more of these types of new pieces of legislation be introduced where Satoshi Action has been given the honor of playing a role.
It's the coolest thing. And yeah, big props to you guys. I remember probably like a year and a half, I don't even know, maybe 2 years ago, we started doing the Bitcoin spaces. And obviously everything was chaotic. We hadn't hit the all-time high yet, so everyone was excited. You were going around, there was so much noise in the Bitcoin space, and it's electric. I think it's when I first started, when I first started also pitching in a little bit for Satoshi Action. I think you guys are doing an amazing job. And like you said, like, we're yapping on Twitter. So like we are able to yap on Twitter a little bit because of people like you guys. So you guys are killing it. What is there coming up? Like, we have, you guys, obviously this is probably the big bulk of your time now, but what do you have your sights set on for 2026? Do you have a lot more things in the agenda? Is it a couple big ones you're looking to do? Like, what is the main focus now?
Absolutely. We already actually, in fact, have another piece of legislation that we're working on where we believe we have found a Democrat and a Republican to co-lead that legislation together.
Oh, nice.
No timeline on when that's going to move forward, but that is something we're excited about. We have a project which has a crossover with AI, so it's a digital asset, crypto, Bitcoin crossover AI policy that we're very excited about. We're doing a lot of work around de minimis. We believe that there needs to be a complete restructuring of the way that we think about de minimis policy.
That would be nice.
Not to dog on the previous proposals, but we just believe that our proposal that we're trying to work towards helps to accomplish all the things that people want, the users want, the policymakers want, and the folks that are worried about the system being abused. I think it all has it nicely fits nicely together in the package that we're putting together. We also have another big project that I think is coming out. It's not, I wouldn't say it's on the campaign side, but it's certainly something that we're excited to get out. And we have a major partnership that we're going to be announcing with that. So yes, lots of things coming. We have plans for many announcements. I don't know if any of this stuff will be announced at BTC Vegas, but there's some really big projects around the corner that I think will make a significant improvement on the position for Bitcoin policy in the United States.
That's fantastic. Are you able to allude at all like what's going on the de minimis side? And for people who aren't aware, if you could provide a little bit of color on that too.
Yeah, so we've seen a number of different proposals, everything from the proposal from Lummis's office to the Parity Act, which is the Horsford-Miller bill in the House. The Parity Act, so the problem that people are highlighting around that legislation is that it only gives a de minimis for stablecoins. So that's a problem. It's been highlighted by multiple groups. We want to see de minimis for broad digital assets, particularly for Bitcoin, and it doesn't include that. So that would be a problem. The Lummis bill does have a broad inclusion for digital assets, all digital assets. I mean, I'm a Bitcoin guy at heart, but at the end of the day, you have to make policy tech neutral. You can't pick winners and losers, and so having a broad-based tech neutral approach to a de minimis exemption would be really valuable. The problem with current proposals, which is problematic, is that there is a dollar cap, which means that there's a dollar cap on the transaction amount, and there's a dollar cap on the total amount that you can do per year. And when I say that, I mean that the current proposal has a $300 basis, so you can claim up to $300 of exemption on the basis of your transaction, and then there's a total of $5,000 that you can claim all year long. On its face, doesn't seem like it's a problem, but there is a very, very deep problem here on Capitol Hill with that type of approach, because when you're talking about why you needed a de minimis, the main reason why you sort of try to negotiate or push for that is you say, hey, well, this is to simplify things. We want to make it easier for taxpayers to occasionally who spend cryptocurrency or Bitcoin to be able to not have to track and trace every tiny little transaction. Huge simplification improvement if we can do it right. It also saves a lot of time and resources for the IRS. If you're sending in, 10,000, you're sending in 50 or 100 transactions where you do all this tracking and recording, assuming there is no de minimis, that's a lot of paperwork for the IRS. So by having a de minimis that works right, you can not only save the taxpayer time and money, you can also save the government time and money. But the problem with having a cap and a basis is that you have to track and trace all of those things, even if you do get the de minimis exemption. And so when you're going to Congress and you're saying, hey, we want to do simplification, but the bill actually does not achieve simplification. That's a major problem, and that's the area where we believe that we have a solution, and we're looking forward to hopefully presenting that and moving that forward in the future.
Amazing. Do you are you able to provide any comments on like the crypto market structure or on the Clarity Act, or even if it's just your personal thoughts on this? I know you're more of a Bitcoin guy, but like you mentioned, what are you gonna do? You know, like we're in the industry. It's part of a bigger industry, so
It matters, and I think it matters for Bitcoin. It matters for the whole space.
yeah.
At the end of the day, I believe that there's still a good shot to pass it this year. There are some major hurdles that need to be overcome. The biggest one is, of course, this yield and rewards on stablecoin issue, which is really a crypto versus the banks conversation. So that's being managed by the White House directly.
Oh,
So
wow.
we're looking forward to seeing what both sides agree on. At Satoshi Action, we prefer that yield be offered to consumers. There's going to be billions and billions and billions of dollars that could be put right back into the pockets of taxpayers. But we also know that there's a big concern from the banks that it could cause deposit flight. So, we'll let them play that out. That's their negotiation to have. You also have the ethics concern. A lot of Democrats have said that they will not vote for a market structure bill without some sort of ethics provisions. Essentially, they're concerned that the Trump family has made billions, multiple billions of dollars in the cryptocurrency space, and they want to see something put into statute to prevent that type of behavior in the future. I don't think you can do it retroactively.
Yeah.
There's also a concern around the CFTC. Right now, there's one person at the CFTC. They need to have a full commission put together, and I think Democrats want to see that their appointees be put in place. They want to see a couple of their people up on the CFTC commission. So
Sure.
that's a major area for concern. You also have the BRCA language. There is some folks in the Senate who don't necessarily like the BRCA language, which is the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act. That's the language that protects developers. Some folks that have, I would say like DOJ backgrounds, people that have attorney general backgrounds, view it as a way to constrain the ability for law enforcement to pursue bad actors, which I think is a valid concern. But there is a Senate office that's really doing quite a bit of work on that to try to get to a place where it's acceptable for the broader ecosystem, because there's a lot of people who signed on to that red line letter saying that if they did not have the BRCA language in the final market structure package, that they would not vote for the bill, or they would not support the bill. So I think that's an area that's being worked on, or I know that's an area that's being worked on, where that's also going to be a significant hurdle. But I do believe we can get to something there.
Very cool. Okay, I appreciate those comments there. I wasn't sure, and that you bring a very interesting perspective there. You're absolutely right. I hadn't even thought about the fact that the ethics thing, I would never have thought about that until you just said it. But that's honestly really smart. And you're right. The President Trump family has made a lot of money, and they're deeply invested in the space, I will say. I mean, you got Eric Trump out there, like really, really leading the way. We've got American Bitcoin, a few other ventures as well on the crypto side. That's interesting. Do you, wow, yeah, I had not thought about that. I appreciate that. Zooming out, I guess, a little bit more on yourself and your life. If you're looking all the way back to like high school, college age, Dennis Porter, did you think you'd be in a position like this, working in like your day to day currently? Was there any idea that you'd be in this world at all? Maybe not Bitcoin, of course, but like in this world, in the legal world, talking to politicians and talking to lobbyists and things like that. Did you think this would be your path?
I wouldn't say I knew it would be my path, but it's definitely something that I've always been interested in. I've been a political junkie my entire life. When I lived in Juarez, Mexico, we would have to cross the border a lot to go back into the United States. It's a fairly long drive, even though we were on the border. Those border lines can be pretty long. Me and my dad would always listen to talk radio. He'd hem and haw about the latest news within the political space. We'd talk back and forth about it. I've really followed the political scene quite aggressively for many years, and so I've always wanted to do something in this space. I've actually attempted to do it a couple different times, pretty failed endeavors, tried to help on a couple campaigns, but nothing really came of it. And so when I had this opportunity with Satoshi Action to launch and do something and make an impact and actually get out there and make a difference, I was very excited. And I'm excited that it worked as well too, because of course,
Sure.
anytime you do anything, whether it's launch a company or launch a political nonprofit, there's a lot of risk that goes into it, and there's a high chance of failure. And yeah, I just couldn't be more proud that we've been able to produce results and make a meaningful impact.
Yeah, definitely. Well, was there anything that surprised you about this journey? Maybe even in the last couple of years, like just parts of the journey that you didn't expect to unfold the way they did, or maybe it was harder or easier than you thought it would be?
Oh, that's a good question. Harder or easier? I would say that I was very, I wouldn't say I was like shocked, but I was surprised, happily surprised, when we launched the very first year that we got our model policies introduced. we were able to pass them into law in Arkansas and Montana.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think that anything will feel. So in some ways, it's kind of sad, but it's like I don't think anything will feel as intense as that first policy win because we just put so much work into it, and it was in the middle of the FTX collapse. I mean, this was 2022,
Oh Lord.
so lawmakers weren't exactly interested in hearing from us or
Yeah.
learning what they could do that would be great for Bitcoin policy in the United States. So that was a huge win. That was a huge surprise. And then just shortly after that, we were able to pass a second model bill into law in Montana. So that would certainly say that's the thing that surprised me the most.
Very cool. Actually, there was God, who was it? I can't remember. I can't remember if it was someone super well known or if it was someone that was not well known. But they were talking about. Oh, it might have been someone at Bitwise. But they were talking about the question was surrounding like where do we sit in the crypto world? Like where do we sit in terms of progression, I guess, and like are we further or worse along than like the 2020? I think they were referencing October 10th when like there was a bunch of cascading events, a bunch of people lost their money a few months ago, and they were comparing it to like an FTX collapse kind of thing. And whoever was speaking was saying they're like, well, listen, like when the FTX thing happened, they were like, you literally could not get a phone call back. Like nobody wanted to talk to us. We were trying to pass this thing. We were trying to get this. I don't know if it was an ETF thing or what it was, but they were like, we could not get a phone call. He goes, now, even with Bitcoin retracing 50%, he goes, we're getting that phone call now. He goes, we're in an entirely different landscape. Would you say that's accurate, or where would you say, like, how would you characterize the current landscape of the crypto world?
Yeah, absolutely, that's accurate. I mean, again, I just unless you have market collapses where to the point where you see FTX, style blowups, that's not really going to unless that happens, you're not really going to see an impact on the way that lawmakers engage with you. Like even if the price were going to some crazy number, like
Yeah.
up to some crazy number, I don't think that also would necessarily make that big of a difference in the way that lawmakers engage because then especially the skeptical ones, people who are your supporters, your champions, of course they're going to be excited about it, right? But the skeptical ones or the people in the middle that you need to get on board with a legislative effort, they're just going to go, oh well, look, it's about to drop or collapse because nothing goes up this fast
Yeah.
without going down just as fast. So I don't think that the price is that prevalent in the way that these offices think about Bitcoin or digital asset policy, unless again you're having this environment where you have big blowups, big collapses, consumers losing a ton of money.
Yeah.
That is a problem. So yeah, I would totally agree with that sort of personal experience that your friend is having with the way that people are engaging. 2022 was tough. It was really hard, and so being able to pass law then was huge. We've gone on to pass almost 12 now into law, and it's become I wouldn't say it becomes easier every time, but we definitely have gotten better and better at it every time.
Sure. Well, what kind of things you picked up along the way would you say, like some of the biggest wins or biggest learnings, I guess, through this whole process? What would you say sticks out to you the most?
Who you choose as your bill sponsor is probably one of the most important things that goes into passing legislation. You don't always get to choose, right? So it's like,
Gotcha.
trying to get to a point where you're working with the right bill sponsor is incredibly important.
Got it. And then a couple of last questions here. If you could give yourself, like if you could give your 18 or 20-year-old self, an 18-year-old Dennis Porter, some advice or words of encouragement or anything at all, like what would you say if you could speak to them? Would you just, kind of carry them on and say, hey, keep doing what you're doing? Would there be like an entirely different message, or what would you say?
Well, knowing where I'm at right now, I wouldn't probably change a whole lot.
Sure.
I will say though, if people are young and they are wanting to engage politically, one of the best avenues to do that is through campaigns. Campaigns can be a very powerful way to build your political career, so to speak, as a political professional. In fact, they also help build quite a lot of relationships, and relationships and building trust is very important, whether you're working on policy or campaigns, because you're in the trenches when you're in these campaigns and when you're on them, and they take a lot of work. You don't get paid enough. You barely sleep. High chance of failure.
Yeah.
So whether you fail or you win and fail with those teams and people that are around you. And so working on campaigns, starting as a volunteer, hopefully working towards a paid position is a really valuable way to use some time. On the policy front, it's a little more difficult. I was fortunate to work alongside someone who's really good at this stuff for 4 years. So that's where I got my experience on the policy front. But with the advent of artificial intelligence and the tools that we have out there, getting to where you want to go is much easier than ever before. The barriers are all stripped down.
Yeah.
You can really teach your things pretty rapidly But yeah, trial and error is certainly a big part of any sort of career. So certainly I've gone through that myself with Satoshi Action, and we've gotten to a place now where again, like I just think this is why lawmakers like working with us, because we know this process and we've been through it so many times and we've done it successfully so many times. But it hasn't come without failure. I think failure is incredibly important for learning.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what I was going to say is actually the part you mentioned something exactly where I was going was going to be like if someone does want to get into the campaigns, if they want to start in this game, what does it actually look like practically? Like, what are a couple of practical steps they could take if they literally are watching this podcast and they're like, I'm down, I would do it, I just don't know what the first step is.
Well, lucky for anybody that wants to volunteer, most campaigns are pretty ready and willing to accept volunteers, and then it's all about building the relationship with the staff, right? Like the people that are actually paid, and providing value. At the end of the day, politics, whether it be campaigns, whether it be policy, it's all about providing value. And the more value you provide, the more interested they're going to want to work with you in the future. And also, I think importantly, it's if you can't just provide value, you also have to make sure you don't make any big mistakes that make your value sort of non-existent anymore because you've made a mistake that's bigger than the value. So there's this there's a strong balance. I think it's important for people though to just trial and error, right? Like try it out, work with those campaigns, eventually try to get a paid position. There are some courses out there for these types of things, for how to be a campaign manager. There's books on it. I would definitely encourage people that want to get into the space to read as much as they can about it, learn as much as they can about it, and also use the new tools that they have out there that will help educate on it and help shape people's opinions about it.
Definitely. Is there are people able to do it like remotely, or is it mainly like, hey, you should try your best to do it in person? Does it make a difference, or?
You can do some of it remote, but a lot of it is in person.
Got it.
Yeah, if you really want to make a difference. I mean, obviously, if you're like running someone's social media, that's not, that's totally remote. But when you're talking about campaigns, it's about knocking doors, it's about filling out mailers, it's about showing up to events. There's a lot of in-person dynamics. Maybe if you're doing oppo research or some other type of approach, there are definitely remote ways to engage on a campaign. Same thing with policy. You can craft the policy, you can make the website, you can raise money even online, but you inevitably have to show up. You have to show up to testify. You have to show up to speak to lawmakers to get them on board. You can find a bill sponsor virtually though. That's for sure. But yeah, there is a part of, no matter what role you're in, for the most part, what part of the political space you're in, there typically is some type of need to be in person. And so if you're going to start in politics, like start locally. Go to your local party, go to your local campaigns that are being run. I typically encourage people to go work on campaigns that align with their political perspective. Don't expect them to be your hero, right? The closer you get to political candidates, the more you learn they're just normal folks, which is totally fine. But work locally is usually the best way to approach it, especially if you're just going to try things out and you want to gain some experience.
Yeah.
And just go in with this mindset also that, remember, whether it be campaigns and whether it be policy, there's a lot of bad apples out there that have scarred a lot of the professionals. So just keep in mind that it might take time to build up the trust. Just keep a smile on your face, keep providing value, and eventually, just like even at your, any job that someone might have, the longer you do that, eventually you're going to be able to move up and get better opportunities.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. Is there any, some closing comments? Are there any last messages you want to put out there to the Bitcoin world, or if it's, to people who are, whether it's younger people or if it's people who are against Bitcoin, they flipped the narrative. Their Bitcoin's dropped too low now. They're not a fan anymore. Like, is there any message that comes to mind that you want to leave the audience with?
I would say that if Bitcoin is getting boring, that might be a good thing. We can see all the hype and all the extra crap that people attempt every year tend to start to go away and move to other industries. That's a good thing for Bitcoin. I want Bitcoin to be durable and sustainable in the sense that I don't want to see these, just as much as I don't want to see the price go down super low, sometimes it also worries me when we see these large fluctuations upwards too, because that means there's quite a bit of volatility in the market. I think it's perfectly fine and acceptable to see some smoothing out. You don't see this. You see real estate continues to be a great investment, but you don't see these 80-point swings in the real estate market. Again, it doesn't bother me. I've been here since 2017. I'm along for the ride, along for the show. But that's certainly something that I think people should remember and think that it's okay that Bitcoin gets a little bit boring.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's a long game I'm finding. There's a lot of players involved, a lot of assets involved, a lot of people, a lot of stuff going on in the world. Dennis, thanks so much for coming on and providing a little bit of clarity, some extra information around the Mine in America Act, as well as basically everything we've hit on the entire Bitcoin space. I feel we covered vast majority of topics. I was also going to say for people who are watching, if you're also in the Bitcoin world, if you're in the media game at all, and you want to chat with Dennis, do your best to shoot him a DM because there's a bunch of stuff coming out. It looks like want to make sure that information is getting out there. I know you're on a media run, so you may be already booked up fully. But no, I appreciate making the time, and I'm glad we got to chat today.
Absolutely. And people should go to the site, satoshiaction.io. We just deployed a brand new website. We've got some information up there about Mined in America under our policy page. So thanks for having me on again, and looking forward to the next time.
Totally. Yeah, for people who are watching, go right above our faces. They're tagged right above our heads. You can go to Dennis's page. You can find Satoshi Action Fund there. If you want to contribute as well, highly recommend. You can go there. You can find all that information there. And repost the stream if you enjoyed it. And we'll see you guys all in the next one. Take care, everybody.